This is a Security Weekly production for security professionals by security professionals. Please visit securityweekly.com/subscribe to subscribe to all the shows on our network.
It's the show where we talk security vendors and aren't afraid to name names. It's Enterprise Security Weekly. This episode is sponsored by Fastly, the application security leader and edge cloud platform behind many top digital experiences. Fastly helps organizations deliver and secure online experiences for their end users through a modern, developer-friendly approach to security. With their next-gen WAF, bot management, and DDoS protections, teams have the tools they need to ensure their applications and APIs perform at their best without sacrificing speed or reliability. Discover how Fastly transforms security into an enabler for digital innovation at securityweekly.com/Fastly. You can't protect what you can't see. Everyone knows that, right? That's why RunZero gives you total visibility across your internal and external attack surfaces. Worried about unknown and unmanageable devices? They've got those covered too. RunZero also helps you illuminate all types of exposures, even the elusive ones. They go beyond CVs to tackle the hard stuff, even 0 days. No agents, no authentication, just crazy deep data about your assets and exposures that focuses on the risks that actually matter. Not an endless sea of CVEs. Go try it for free and start seeing results in minutes. Visit securityweekly.com/RunZero to get started. Welcome to Identiverse 2025. We're here recording live from the CyberRisk TV studio on the expo floor at the Mandalay Bay Conference Center in Las Vegas. I'm your host, Adrian Sanabria, and joining me for this interview is Treb Ryan, General Manager at Cubeless. Welcome, Treb.
Hey, thanks for having me, Adrian.
Excited about the conversation, especially because you're giving away free stuff.
Yeah, I know. It's we're kind of excited about that too. I've been looking around the floor, and it seems like we're the only ones who are doing this. So It's always nice to have a little space to yourself. It's also nice that we think there's a real reason this needs to be free for people. And there's a lot of opportunity when you allow people to start using ID in their businesses and in their organizations. It doesn't have to be just a business. Where they start using single sign-on and multi-factor authentication.
So before we go too deep, what's free?
So
what are you giving away?
The basic free offering from us is what we call Cubeless Verify. It was part of our product that was doing the remote workforce. And we realized this was the area that people were most interested in. It was where it had the most pain points.
Yeah.
And Cubeless Verify is very simply a single sign-on multi-factor authentication system that you go in and sign up for right online. You do it today after you hear this video at cubeless.io. You go in there, you invite your users, you start setting up your apps, and you start assigning those out, and you have single sign-on capabilities for any app that handles SAML and standard one-time password multi-factor authentication, either with our mobile app or if you're using a Google Authenticator. All those pieces are included. So,
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Very cool. Yeah, and it's kind of the inverse of what we're used to seeing in the market.
Yeah,
usually SSO costs you extra.
You see it in two sides. One is, it's always been an enterprise product. And so to take it from the app provider side, the last company I was with, when I first came on, they had just created an SSO integration. So it's 2020, it's when you start seeing even smaller apps put those in place. And they immediately wanted to put it in our enterprise tier. And I'm like, why? It doesn't cost us anything. And the more people we can get using our app, the more they'll do. We did error management, so we'll see more errors and we'll see more things if we get people on it more easily. But the reason it goes into enterprise is because that's the only people in the past who needed SSO, right? Yeah. When all these companies were created, you weren't going out to some, 25-person accounting shop and saying, let's use SSO. You were going out to big organizations that had sophisticated implementations and wanted to put it in place. But with today's market, really, as we say, identity is the center now of all security. With stuff like zero trust and everything, the easiest way to make sure you're secure is not to do it through the traditional forms. It's to get someone's ID down and then give them the appropriate roles and access based on that ID. But that is something that is only available to people who have the money to pay for enterprise packages. And when it should be available to any company, and it shouldn't be, there's a barrier to that, because by adopting that, they're going to have a whole new world of things they can do that makes their life easier as well as more secure in the way they manage the team. And that allows them to do all these new things we're talking about that you see here in the show today, because they have the basics done and they're already in place. They've got IDs for their people, and they're able to do that regardless of the size of their organization or the quality, the depth of their IT staff.
Yeah, it makes sense. So it does seem counterintuitive when you pitch it that way, that making SSO the only available and the most expensive option, that's a barrier to adoption for your product.
And it makes, like, again, it's very hard to do this in the beginning, right? When the first SSO applications came out, and I was working a lot of SaaS, we were banging our head against the wall for single sign-on from like 2007, right?
Yeah.
Everybody knew this was where it was going, but the ability to actually create something that worked with multiple applications was quite difficult, and the cost associated with that was quite difficult. But this is at a point now where these are table stakes. We had, when we originally built our product for the remote workforce, we built on Auth0, which is, fine. You can go into some of the strengths and weaknesses in there.
Yeah.
But the guy, he says, we want you to sign up for 50,000 users. And I'm like, you gotta be kidding me. I'll be lucky if I have 500 users. This app just is coming out today. And, that idea, both not only just the cost, but the enterprise sales method of going about that makes it very difficult for organizations who don't have the resources in terms of dollars or the resources in terms of experts, right? The vast majority of the people who are now seeing SSO as an important part of business, because maybe they're being required to, because they do a finance, they're an outsourced accounting firm, and they're getting asked more and more that they need to have these security pieces in place. They probably have an outsourced IT firm who's working for the outsourced accounting firm. And if that IT firm has a security guy, they probably don't have an identity person, right? And so the first barrier was the cost. And the second barrier is this stuff is hard. It's still so hard. I think, we want to make sure that it's easier. I say
hard in what way?
Just take for anybody who knows this. There's
to
something called
configure
an
the SAML
entity ID, right? There are 13 different terms for entity ID that every single application uses a different term for that. And then there's entity IDP, entity ID, and service provider entity ID. And for each of these things, you have to become versed in each application, what they're saying it is, and what it's called by their customer. Now, we have some fun things coming forward about doing what we call a translator, but this simple piece in there. One of the simple things we do is when you see the documentation, it tells you all the different things it could be called. So when you're looking at someone who's using client ID instead of IDP, entity ID, you'll know that client ID is a synonym for this, right? And by the way, signed assertions and documents, and it's crazy how little standardization there is, or even how you get the metadata across is different in almost every single app. So making this, there's someone who can say, here's how it works, and here's how you should get it into the next piece. Also, a lot of we found it was very overcomplicated. Here's 18,000 knobs and dials. I had a hard time with my own engineers. We don't need to have all those knobs and dials in there. We just need 90% of this is going to be these 5 switches that the customer needs to know. Just put those up there. But what if they need something else? Well, put that down in advanced. But if you put all this information where there's, take a key cloak where there's 5,000 different, you don't know which the important ones are. What are the ones I'm supposed to have? What are the ones I'm not? So you need to make this something that is more intuitive for people who don't spend all day in identity. And on top of that's how you get signed up. This is much more like signing up for Slack than it is like signing up for a traditional IDP. You get an email invite, you put it out there. When you sign up, you just go in there, do your MFA first, because we need to know you, so you can then become the admin, and then just start dropping your apps in. It's much simpler than a traditional environment. Does it has flexibility? Does it have the complexity that some of the more enterprise apps are? But no, that's A, something that people don't need in our environment, and B, often can be something that stops adoption because they get overwhelmed in trying to set this up.
No, that totally makes sense. And it's, it's a constant battle with, should the product be simple or, should the product be powerful, right? Powerful's every time I see somebody market a tool as powerful, I'm like, okay, so I need to go to training before I can use it.
Right. And I come up from the SaaS world and then cloud software. And you see this over and over and over again. What starts as a simple application by necessity gets more and more complicated over time. And that's a real thing, because as the customers become more sophisticated and as they grow, then you're going to have to add in more things to take the larger needs of a large organization. And most good apps will start growing from people buying online and getting their freemium product to more sophisticated long-term users. The risk of that is you can't start there, right?
Yeah.
You can't start with something that's requires a lot of training and buy-in just to get up and running, because in a product-led growth where you get people to sign up and use it, that friction you put into place is a lost user.
Yeah,
People will drop
killer.
out of the system over and over and over again, while the real key is to get them using it as quickly as possible and seeing success on that, because that's what it drives adoption, and that's what gets people using your system.
Yeah, no, totally. And it's almost like more art than science, and trying to figure out like what is simple enough,
right?
But then doesn't not simple in a way that they're not going to do the important things.
And there's tools out there today. It's a little easier. They're not as good as they say they are, but where you can see where a user, say, drops out of the process. I think some of the even simpler ideas is we have on every page when you're in the app, there's feedback form. As much as I like to think that all 120 apps that we have just out of the gate, or the custom, you can put any other app on top of that, is going to have the right things in for a config. Unfortunately, I don't have the money to sign up for 125 enterprise software license applications, and so you want to have someone going, "Hey, I'm stuck here," and plus, obviously, the regular customer success support, the people who are there.
Yeah.
That's why in the business, by the way, customer success is seen in both sales and support, because the more the customers use it, the more they grow, and then the more chance you have of getting revenue from it.
Yeah, and it's how's it been to scale that up? Because free product, you're encouraging feedback. Like I imagine for that process to be successful, you got to get back in touch pretty quickly, or they're going to lose interest. You're gonna lose them. So how's it been scaling that?
There's better tools for it today to start getting than there used to be in the past. A lot of in-app capabilities. I won't tell you how it's worked on this one so far, but I can tell you how I've done it in past ones, and it works exceedingly well. The better you can respond and help the customer get to they want, it is the closest thing to magic. If your success rep is calling them and not talking to them about upgrading, but just saying, here's how you can use this more effectively, the relationship changes fantastically, because they look at this as, we're helping you do this more. Now, when you do it more, we're going to get paid more in the long run, whether it's conversion ratios or if you have someone who's on a paid plan where you can go up to it. So you have to have that capability, but it's not as overarching, it's not as tough as it used to be. And, we're a little early on for us, but there's obviously a bunch of new tools around AI and those pieces where on our application, AI is used to create automated configurations. We've already done that on a few. It's not something we're announcing yet, but in those places, you can also do that, obviously, to gather information from a client that you can even feed back into those AI agents and say, hey, this is the feedback we're getting. Use that as a learning model for making a new configuration, as well as giving it to, of course, the standard piece, which our guy Ian over here is going to send you a message chat or send you an email and check in on how you're doing.
So if this, the base product is free, what is the monetization strategy here?
And I ought to say it is going to continue to be free. Single sign-on, and what we see as core elements around that.
Sure.
So, example, our authentication right now is Multi Factor Authentication. We're close to releasing a passkey as well. To me, that is a core to using the product. The easier you make it for people, and the more secure you make it, the more likely they're going to grow. So I don't want to add friction to that process. You'll see us as we add more and more of these automated AI integrations. Those are going to be free. What are they going to buy from us then? I'm not 100% sure. That's the nature. One of the natures of doing a product-led growth company. We have the remote security product. We might see people move into that, but we have some ideas about. SSO costs a lot of money besides just the cost of the provider, us, the IDP, the cost of the technical expertise to manage this in your identity shop, your IT, your security people. There's also costs in adopting it and integrating with other applications. And so our guess is there's an opportunity for us to be able to reduce your costs with other applications. But that's a guess. And the best thing is we'll know a lot more when we end up adding, with the idea is, with the free offering, we should have enough users who are actually saying, this is what I really want. And this is what I want built in, and this is what I'd be willing to actually is valuable enough for me to pay. And we're not talking. This is something for us that looks like $5 a user, not $10. This is not identity should not get to be prohibitively expensive. I mean, heck, half the time with the SSO tax, you have to pay more than $5 or $10 just to get it into your organization. And those are things where we think there might be some opportunities, but we'll find out. I have to ask you at the next conference.
I imagine with the data that you gather from that, it's going to kind of inform what direction you go in. That data is going to be interesting.
It's a slow process as opposed to doing sales. You don't get to quite the revenue as fast as you do when you do sales. But if you've done this for a while and you're willing to have the patience, unfortunately, we're part of a bigger company, so we're an independent division, which does, by the way, just outsource support. It's called Mod Squad, and they have gig people. They were one of the first gig companies all over the world who log in and do support. And it's where the original security product and where identity became so important, because you don't know where anybody's going to be logging in from. So ensuring they're them is the most important piece to doing the rest of security in the environment. And so that's why we got into the identity, those identity pieces. But that, we know where we're going to scale with that. But being able to talk to those people gave us the ideas of what we made sure we had to do for this product, from day one. Also, it was a nice advantage to come in. I've done, ground zero startups. I'm usually cloud-based software to like 10 million. That's where my strengths are, and I happen to have a strength in converting services into software in those places. But I will say, having done this a million times, it's nice to have been part of a bigger organization. It gives us some expertise, especially around actually security. We do have a dedicated identity management guy, and get some expectations on there. It also means that we get things like, even when we first came up with the first iteration of Cubeless Verify last year, as the bigger product, it was SOC 2 certified in 3 months. Partly because we know how to write apps that are secure in and of itself, and we have an environment that people understand how to run that environment, so you can get your certifications. That's a real load off of that, because of course, whenever you're doing a security product, you have to no one's going to buy you because you say we have SOC 2, but they might not buy you if you don't, even if it's free. If they're putting their identities out there, they need to be confident that this is done in an area that's been repeated before, that's gone through the types of audits necessary to get their stuff onto it. So as much as we talk about price and easy use as our primary two pieces into there, or no price and ease of use, it's got to be reliable too, and that's kind of the third tenet of the organization.
Identity's pretty important.
Yeah, it is. And I did the back end of a lot of SaaS applications, included the security piece on there. It can never get you another customer, but it can lose you a lot of customers extremely quickly. Sure. And it's something that you need to go in with confidence that, this is an application that was built the right way, it's put on the right types of infrastructure, and it's been proved through, even in the initial days, to go through the kind of audits that are difficult for even sometimes, mature companies. Maybe often more difficult for mature companies, because we wrote it the way to pass that to begin with, right? We understood what we were doing. Why mature companies often have to go back and change a lot of things in order to get that kind of certification.
Yeah, free's great, but free also becomes a liability.
Yes.
Yeah.
You don't want to lose that identity. We're fortunately not dealing with much in the way of PII, but that's the number one thing we know we need to protect against. But even from an identity perspective, and there is a higher level of necessity when you have a single point of entry into these things. It's why on top of just easy use for the users, you'll see passkeys. MFA is great, and for the people we're talking to, it's one-time passwords is the 99.99 when they're at nothing. It's really so much better than what they already have. But passkeys we know are even one step beyond that, right? And so those pieces will allow us to not only add additional ease of use for the user, because I think we all prefer using passkeys and one-time passwords, but it will also give the company even a greater level of feeling of security that those users aren't going to get phished or hacked.
Yeah. Good stuff. Treb, thank you so much for
It
joining
was really
me today.
a pleasure talking to you.
Yeah.
I'm excited. I'm excited to see you guys soon. We'll tell you all the new things that people have started asking us for.
To find out more about Cubeless, you can visit securityweekly.com/CubelessIDV. And for all Identiverse 2025 coverage, you can visit securityweekly.com/IDV. Thanks again, Treb.
Thanks, Adrian. Have a good one.
Yeah. Welcome to Identiverse 2025. We're here recording live from the Cyberist TV studio on the expo floor at the Mandalay Bay Convention Center in Las Vegas. I'm your host, Adrian Sanabria, and joining me for this interview is Sagi Roden, CEO of Fronteg. Welcome, Sagi.
Thank you for having me.
To be honest, Fronteg, I'm not very familiar with the company, so maybe give me a little bit of background on the company and what you guys do.
Yeah, so we're a 5-year-old company based in Mountain View, California and Tel Aviv, Israel. The company is basically solving the customer identity challenge for SaaS companies. So you would have modern companies, different shapes and sizes using us, so they don't have to deal with the risks of security within their customer identity and user management, scaling it up, and developing all the features that are basically table stakes today in any modern SaaS application.
So it's a B2B product that helps one of those Bs with their B2C.
Exactly, or B2B, yeah. So
or
basically
B2B.
we're either B2B2B or B2B2C.
Yeah, okay, got it.
Yeah.
Hope everybody else got it. I got it.
Yeah, it will take a minute.
Yeah. So what are, I think, thanks partly to AI, but just the fact that, just the nature of some of the attacks that we're seeing, I think it is an inflection point for identity at this point. Apparently, identity security is a new term, which is baffling to me because I've dealt with identity, from the very beginning of my career in the early 2000s. But yeah, I guess a lot of people working in identity, it wasn't as well paired with security there. So what are some of the trends you're seeing come out of this? Like in, your 5-year-old company, have those trends significantly changed even since you guys got started 5 years ago?
Yeah, significantly changed. I think that even before going to AI, there are a few trends that are happening that are interesting to note. First of all is the user experience, because we used to think about customer identity as just logging in, getting the token, validating it, expiring it once it's off, and that's it. Today, I think that most of the users are just used to a different type of authentication. You go to any app today, you're used to Face ID. My kid, he plays a lot of video games, and he will basically tell me, "Dad, give me your face so I can log in into my game."
Yeah.
He wouldn't ask for a password, right? And,
right.
And this is just a new experience kind of that we see all over, and that makes a lot of companies kind of be aware of that. Product managers that want to make the experience of their users more smooth are becoming more aware, embedding that obviously into their roadmaps. The second thing that is happening, and I think that this is partially because of the AI trend, is that I think that moat is becoming harder to get, right? This differentiation of your product is something that nobody can copy, because features are being built so fast these days through Cursor and stuff like that.
Yeah, vibing.
Exactly. So a lot of companies need to kind of reinvent themselves, and this happens by finding new go-to-markets. A lot of the companies we see that are developing second and third products to provide more value. And I think that this is interesting because the identity becoming more complex. Now you need to manage identity across multiple applications, several types of users and accounts. and need to worry about their user experience, the security behind it, making everything scalable, which is also becoming the kind of responsibility for the identity providers to make it easier for the vendors to go through this transition.
Yeah. Yeah, I think a lot of people, when they look at an application, a web application, they don't realize how many components are integrated within that, right? And buried within that. Yeah, so, diving into some of these trends more deeply. So, one thing that seems very, like it could get very complicated very quickly is agentic. Yeah, I think at one point we were thinking, okay, within the enterprise, I'm going to have this one agent that knows everything, the super employee that sees and touches everything, and that seemed like a terrible idea. Because obviously that's immediately going to be, like, as a pen tester or an attacker, like my one-stop shop for everything.
Yeah.
It's going to be really abused by employees and attackers, maybe. And now, it makes a lot more sense to have specialized agents that do different things and interact with different APIs, with different services and things like that. And you can already see how, even with consumer apps, this would make a lot of sense, right? Like use cases like maybe I want all my banking information, my transactions to be available to my CPA, but my CPA is using some kind of agent-based platform for this to look for common mistakes and pitfalls and things like that. So how big of a challenge is this going to be? Like, it seems like we haven't even figured out if an AI agent is going to be handled more like a person or more like a machine identity, right?
Yeah, and maybe somewhere in the middle, right? So we kind of think about it not as either a human being or a machine, because it's kind of in the middle. It has its own kind of characteristics, and I think that agentic is super interesting. On the one hand, we see that organizations are starting to build agents into their roadmaps. It's still not very production grade, but we do see a lot of our customers that we spoke to planning to release sort of an agent even this year. Mm-hmm. So obviously when you build an agent like that, you need to help users authenticate into this agent in a native way, right? Like just as you authenticate into ChatGPT or stuff like that. But the other thing which is kind of unique in that area is the ability to allow the agents to connect to different services and different kind of third-party applications within the ecosystem. And here it becomes very tricky, because on the one hand, you got new standards like MCP rising. On the other hand, we all know that security is not the strongest part there. So we definitely see that we need to help there. And the second thing is to enable your products to be accessed and operated by agents, which is another task. So those two, the inbound aspect and the outbound aspects, are super interesting and definitely changing the way identity is kind of perceived as only a SaaS thing.
Yeah, right. Like even agents that maybe use your identity as well. We're seeing robotic automation. This kind of move the mouse cursor, right? Because not all these services, like especially like if I think travel planning, that kind of thing. There's a lot of very old UIs, that these companies aren't really inclined to update, I guess. Trip it and things like that. Like there's no API. They weren't built with an API. Very, very old code base, and so you need something that actually logs in as you and access you, and has to click the interface and click checkboxes and click save and wait a certain number of seconds for the next page to load. So that seems like even more complexity there, right?
It's complex. I think that there are headless browsers today and companies like that deal with those things to enable agents to operate. But I think also that this level of freedom that you just described introduces a few more challenges, right? Because even if I kind of allow the end user to connect through this prompt or chat or whatever UX is there, an agent, to these third-party services, right? What is going to prevent the user to basically write, I don't know, like delete all of the records in my Salesforce, right? Because the connection was made. So something needs to monitor and prevent this type of kind of activities. And I think that here is again the challenge of identity companies to really manage those entitlements and permissions and role management in a rather different ways, because as you mentioned, it's not like API, so you either can access that or you're blocked. It's somewhere in the middle with a lot of shades. And I think that here it becomes super interesting for companies like us to enable this natural language interaction.
Yeah, like just checking into my hotel here at Mandalay Bay, trying to use the mobile check-in completely failed for me because my credit card rejected it, and it takes it so long to send me the, was this really you? Yes or no? And then I say yes, and it says, okay, for 1 hour you can try the transaction again. But at that point I hadn't even gotten the error message or the email from Mandalay Bay. So I've already tried 4 or 5 times by the time I get that first email from that first time I tried. So, it seems like latency, like again, going back to the trend of user experience you're talking about, that's super important, because when I get that email, I'm like, did that come from the 4th try or the 1st try or the 2nd? I'm very confused at this point. I just give up and I go to the front desk and I just let them handle it. And so they've got all these signs like mobile login, but the moment a credit card doesn't work, it all falls apart.
Yeah, I agree. It's just like buying a Tesla, starting your journey with a flat tire, right?
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, the authentication part is the onboarding. That's your first step into the application, into the hotel, as you mentioned. It's kind of
Sorry, Mandalay, don't kick me out of my room.
It's the first experience that you get, and it's really important to nail that experience. And I think that we're seeing also a trend, and I haven't spoken about it, that it's not only the security, the engineers that care. Suddenly you get go-to-market people that care, right? The marketing manager or the CMO even, they would care a lot about how this experience and getting through the door into the product looks like. It affects the sign-up rates, right? The conversion rates and stuff like that. You would get the security people to care because there's features like, enabling SSO connections and stuff like that, which are also important to sell the product.
Yeah.
So we kind of believe it's written on our booth, identity for the whole team, not just as a slogan, because we actually see that there's a lot of team members that use our product behind the scenes, even support, and not only developers or not even only security.
Yeah. And we've seen that shift, the design of a lot of these products over the years. Like I remember for marketing teams, everybody had to share the Twitter password at one point, right? There wasn't any kind of workflow or way for a company social account to be shared and used by multiple people. And then we started seeing companies pop up to solve that problem, Buffer and Owler and a lot of these. And just the other day, Buffer finally sent me something and said, okay, you can now at companies or people, because it doesn't work when you're doing it from another platform, because it needs to populate that list of, okay, which company are you talking about, which person are you talking about? And it's that user experience has been pretty bad for a while.
Yeah, when customer identity was introduced as a thing about 10, 13 years ago as a service, it was mainly aiming at consumer applications. And it was pretty easy, right? Like you sign up with a username and password, and basically you're in, then it throws you out, you have to re-log in.
You need a password reset process.
Exactly, multi-factor was introduced, but when more B2B companies started to rise, basically the whole challenge became more complicated, because now a user is not a user on his own, he's a user within an organization, and he has roles within that organization. And then you would see a user from an MSSP or whatever that needs to access several organizations with different roles and permissions. And it became more complicated. We are the one who brought kind of this concept of B2B identity about 5.5 years ago. And since then, we see that the largest growth in the popularity of usage in customer identity becomes in those complex challenges when there's several customers, several types of applications, You'll get a lot of types of users that belong to those organizations. You have different levels of organizations. If a company acquires a company, right, you inherit all of their tree of sub-organizations, and you need to manage all of that. And that's complex, and that's even before agents are kind of starting to participate in this game as well, which we already start to see.
It seems your example about the face authentication and your kid, it makes me think we will have a period, or maybe it is right now, where there's a generation that's never used passwords and a generation that's never used anything but passwords existing at the same amount of time. And I've seen people who are uncomfortable with passkeys because it doesn't feel secure, because you just click log in and it happens. They don't have to provide anything. And then on the other side, this expectation that everything's going to be fingerprint or face ID or, something completely frictionless.
Yes, I agree. I think that, we will see new methods arising. We will see a lot of security coming into place, because with the AI, the attack surface is obviously becoming more obvious.
Yeah.
It's easier to attack the applications or user app to attack a certain company, kind of use you as a supply chain attack vector. And the authentication methods will have to be much better. Today we're seeing a lot of device flow authentication that is happening. So basically when you need to authenticate, you just kind of scan a QR code and you're in, which is great. We see obviously passkeys, as you mentioned, and a lot of other things.
Yeah.
And I think that as the technology evolves, we will see even more sophisticated methods that will make the experience much better.
Yeah, that's excited to see that.
Yeah, but also will make the CISOs not sleep at night, right?
Yeah.
Because I think that, it used to kind of be considered that customer identity security, as you mentioned, it's a engineering thing or a product thing. But today we actually see that companies are kind of expecting security teams and CISOs to be responsible for that as well. So a lot of those CISOs want control. They want to set up their own policies, regardless of what the product supports or not.
Yeah.
So we're trying to enable them kind of an easy way to get their level of support without overstepping maybe the product and the engineering, and live side by side together with mutual goal at the end of the day.
Yeah, tough balance.
Yeah, it is.
Well, thank you so much, Sagi, for joining me today. Great conversation. I enjoyed it. And to find out more about FrontEgg, you can visit securityweekly.com/FrontEggIDV. For all Identiverse 2025 coverage, you can visit securityweekly.com/IDV. Thanks again, Sagi.
Thank you so much.
Do your end users always, and I mean always, without exception, work on company-owned devices and IT-approved apps? I didn't think so. So my next question is, how do you keep your company's data safe when it's sitting on all those unmanaged apps and devices? 1Password has an answer to this question: Extended Access Management. 1Password Extended Access Management helps you secure every sign-in for every app on every device, because it solves the problems traditional IAM and MDM can't touch. Check it out at securityweekly.com/1Password. Imagine a world where every threat, ransomware, supply chain attacks, zero-day exploits is stopped before it can even begin. ThreatLocker makes that world a reality with a zero-trust approach to cybersecurity. By giving you granular control on every executable in your environment, ThreatLocker protects your business around the clock. No more guessing, no more gaps. Just rock-solid protection that keeps your operations running smoothly and your data secure. Discover how ThreatLocker's least privilege approach can safeguard your organization against known and unknown threats. Take the first step towards total peace of mind by visiting securityweekly.com/ThreatLocker today. Welcome to Identiverse 2025. We're here recording live from the Cyberist TV studio on the expo floor at the Mandalay Bay Conference Center in Las Vegas. I'm your host, Adrian Sanabria, and joining me for this interview is Amir Ofek, CEO at Exonius X. Welcome, Amir.
Thank you, Adrian.
So I'm betting a lot of people have heard of Exonius, but a lot of people like me haven't heard of Exonius X. So let's start there.
Sure.
What is Exonius X and the relationship?
Yeah, so Exonius X was founded 4 years ago as the innovation team, innovation unit within Exonius. We're like a startup within a startup mode. And our charter is really to build new products, new offerings that go and expand the Exonius offering, the Exonius platform. And that's what we've been doing for the last 4 years.
And so are you exclusively focusing on identity, or is that just one of many things that you're working on?
So we constantly have other ideas, popping up in our head. We started our first actually product that we launched was around SaaS management.
Okay.
And managing
SSPM?
SSPM, exactly, managing SaaS applications. And that kind of brought us to the understanding that a lot of IAM folks that were tasked with SaaS management actually need also solutions around identity management. And that's when we started kind of focusing on identity management. Currently, that's our prime focus. We launched the product just at the beginning of this year, and we're now focusing on it.
Yeah. Before I went independent, became a consultant, the last vendor I worked for was SSPM.
Oh,
so
nice.
I was aware of that. I was aware that you guys were stepping into
I
this
see a lot
space.
of synergies between those two domains, yeah.
And it's very true. Like when I worked for that company, what we did in identity was very basic. It was, is MFA enabled? Is it enforced? Didn't go very deep, didn't go into access control or RBAC or anything like that. So, and it's with posture management in general, it's interesting how often you just come back to identity.
Correct.
Again and again. It's the thing that ties
all together.
Yeah. Yeah. So you've got the statement, actionability meets identity. What does that mean?
Yeah, so we are now in Exonius starting something that we call the actionability era. We believe that it's very nice to collect a lot of data and to analyze it, but if you don't drive it to action at the end of the day, it's a bit meaningless. So that's kind of what we are now applying across all of our platform. Now, at the very fundamental of it, Exonius is a data product or a data platform.
Right.
We collect data
lots
from lots of integrations, lots of sources, etc. And we started by kind of driving the truth of that data, like becoming a single source of truth for the organization. But just leaving it there is not enough. So we said, let's drive this truth to action. Let's actually try building workflows. Let's try and kind of build the remediation, the recommendation for what you do with what we unravel. And it's very relevant when it comes to identity. So when it comes to identity, it's very important to create visibility of all identities within the company, observability of them, so you can recommend what type of analysis to draw from that, etc. But if you don't drive it to action at the end of the day, manage the identity lifecycle, managing risk, managing posture, as you mentioned, then it's a bit kind of only halfway through.
Yeah, so it makes me think of vulnerability management in a way that a lot of the extra context you need in vulnerability management, the asset owner has that.
Correct.
Not the vulnerability analyst.
Correct.
And also the remediation piece, the asset owner does that, not the analyst. So how much of a challenge is that when you're talking about actionability? Your product, I imagine, is not being used by the asset owner in this case. Is that a challenge?
Well, not necessarily. It's not being used by the asset owner. I would say IAM teams at the end of the day. Well, you could call them the kind of the asset owner or not. But IAM teams at the end of the day, they need to manage the entire identity, whether it is for security reasons, whether it is for operational reasons, and you need to drive action of managing those identities. You need to make sure that you govern and provide all of the permissions in the right manner, that you entitle the employees joining the companies, leaving the company, you entitle all of the service accounts, the non-human accounts, and so on. So yeah, they're not like the asset owner, let's say, of a service account, but they should see themselves as the one responsible that every service account has an owner, that every service account has the right permissions, and definitely when it comes to human identities around the company.
So the IAM team is the ICP for this product?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
So The
I made a
IAM
bad
team-
assumption.
Yeah. So the IAM team, from our perspective, is the one to own the Axonius Identities product. The IAM team can sit in the IT side of the business or in the security side of the business. And what we see very, very often is the need to bridge between the two. So I think the best companies that really prevail and solve the identity security aspect and the identity operational one are the ones that really know how to collaborate between security and IT, bring it all together. If you don't bridge and you act in silos, it's always a bit broken at the end of the day.
Yeah. And is this product complementary with other IGA solutions, or is it intended to be a replacement?
Well, it can be both, I would say. So first, when we came to the identity space, as I mentioned, we evolved through kind of the SaaS world. So what IAM folks told us is that you do very well this aggregation of data and in a very profound way because you have a single data model that brings it all together.
Yeah.
So that's a very required now aspect when it comes to identity. Identities today act in silos and you really want to bring them all together. So the first thing that we do is even not IGA. It's what today the industry called ISPM, Identity Security Posture Management.
Okay.
Basically creating all of the visibility and observability of all of the identities that lie out there, whether they're on the cloud, SaaS, on-prem, servers, you name it. So that's the first thing. Second thing is really bringing the IGA component in terms of driving the whole kind of governance, lifecycle management, and so on. And the third element is those new kind of trends right now that are called NHI and ITDR, which from my perspective are just components of building a comprehensive identity product. So we cover all of that. So it's not just IGA by the kind of, I would say, traditional way of looking at IGA. It's a bit more kind of comprehensive from all of those new capabilities.
Yeah, and just mentioning all those things, the detection and response piece, the non-human identities piece, a lot of that, to me, that sounds like, okay, we need another connector, we need another integration to pull in that data because that data lives in different places, but it's connected as well. For the detection and response, maybe that's one of your posture management findings is logs are not enabled for this.
Exactly.
Or they're not enabled, they're not rich enough or detailed enough.
Exactly. So that's exactly the strength of us.
Especially in Microsoft. This
Microsoft.
always happens in Microsoft.
Always happens in those large, I would say, multiple layer type of platforms.
Yeah.
So that's the strength of Axonius. So Axonius over the years, we are 8 years, have been exactly in that business of building and putting together integrations from various sources under a single data model. We have a very strong correlation engine. We have a very strong normalization, deduplication, cleansing of all of that data. Today we have over 1,200 such integrations. We call them adapters. And this adapter factory that we build is exactly playing a very strong part when it comes to identities.
So you don't need to rebuild that. You get to just sit on top of what Axonius is. Oh,
exactly.
That's amazing.
The whole concept of Axonius really is we have now evolved into a true platform.
Yeah.
So we have those back-end engines like the adapter factory, like our correlation engine, like our workflow engine, and additional aspects that are cutting across all of our products, whether they're on the asset management side of things, whether they're on SaaS management side of things, and whether they're now in the identity management side of things.
Yeah. Yeah, so this is an interesting question about tying identity governance to cyber asset observability. I mean, clearly, if you don't know, you have the asset, right?
Exactly. What you don't see, what you don't know, you cannot really manage. It's true for cyber assets. It's true for vulnerability management and exposures, and it's definitely true for identities. If you don't know all of the identities in the company, who is accessing them, through where they're accessing them, whether an identity is being accessed through a specific server, through a specific endpoint, through a specific cloud workload, then it's very hard to understand the context of that identity. And I think that's, again, the unique perspective that we bring now to the IGA space of bringing additional context layer, of bringing this context of the identity doesn't live by its own, in a silo.
Yeah.
This identity either you need to bring the context of where it was reached from, where the permission was granted through, which other identities are actually interacting with that server, with that workload, and so on and so on. And that's kind of the unique perspective that we can bring with Axonius.
I imagine you can discover some gaps there as well. Like I'm thinking, okay, like maybe this is a non-corporate device. It's not corporate managed, so there's no agents on it.
Right.
But I know the asset exists because it showed up on a network scan, and then I see a login event coming from it. So I can derive from that what type of device it is, who's using it.
Exactly.
Whether it's a laptop or a server or...
Exactly. Yeah. So specifically when you look at the ITDR use cases, for example, it's not a coincidence, it's called detection and response.
Yeah.
And the detection part is really important to bring the context. So it's not just monitoring the behavior of the identity, it's really to understand, like you said, which device this identity was tracked in. Where was it logging in? Where was it logging in during the time of the day, during location, during IP address, and so on. And then you build the remediation or the response based on that context. It's not just spitting out logs into a SIEM or of sort and hoping that somebody will know what to do with them.
So where are you seeing a lot of success, like early success stories with this? Where are people, kind of having that light bulb moment? Where they're like, okay, like I understand why this needs to be a thing.
Yeah, so I'll give you maybe a few examples without naming specific companies. So one of our early customers is actually a very large conglomerate of manufacturing.
Okay.
So imagine like 8 opcos all under one kind of holding company. And what they needed is really an ability to create one centralized view of all of your identities within the entire kind of global operation that they have.
As an incident responder in my past, I've wanted that for so long.
Exactly. Yeah. So their main issue was that currently it was very bespoke, very siloed. They couldn't tell what the specific opco was defining as an identity versus another one, and they couldn't create that kind of full view. And with Axonius, that was something they got quite quickly. So by the fact we could integrate to all of their PAM solutions, to all of their IDP solutions, to all of their ADs that are lying around the world, in various locations, in various contexts, we could pull all of that data, normalize it, and create for them one single repository, which was like by itself already a big win for them, for all of their capabilities. But we didn't stop there. We then took that and actually implemented their full IGA across the operation. We're now kind of in the process of deploying it, of creating a common IGA workflows, common IGA rules across the company that they can actually manage in a very concise way. So that was one use case. Another common use case that we see is what we see in terms of PAM enhancement. So we have one of our customers is a large pool manufacturing company in Europe.
Like swimming pool.
Like swimming pools, yeah. And they have, again, operations globally, etc. They deploy their PAM, but they saw that their PAM is becoming a bit kind of not up to date, let's call it, because some of the privileged identities that started kind of coming up in the organization were not updated on a regular basis to their PAM solution. So the ability to constantly monitor what are the new privilege administrators or privileged identities that need to be entered into the PAM, it was a very, very kind of immediate use case. The other one was to clean the data or to provide more hygiene to their existing PAM deployments. So there were a lot of privileged identities there that were no longer existing or were no longer privileged. That had to be cleansed up from their PAM solution. So this kind of PAM enhancement or PAM hygiene, so to speak, is something that we see very, very common.
Yeah, so your first example is really interesting because I feel like that's kind of the holy grail, like pulling the identity together in all those places. Because, I think back in 2007 we saw a future where everything went through SSO.
Correct.
Never happened, right?
Yes.
So you'll have somebody who is first letter, last name, maiden name in this system, but then they got married, never got changed in this system.
Correct.
Got changed in this system, which is first letter, middle initial, first 5 digit letters of last name. And you have to match all that up somehow.
Exactly. So
How do you do that?
that's kind of what we do for living. Okay. What we do for living is first understanding the source of information. So we go very deep into understanding the granular information, the granular permission, sometimes up to the resource level, like a GitHub repo, who has a permission to, who doesn't, what level this repo has. So we don't stop just at the access level. We really understand the source of the data. And then we build very strong correlation engines that know how to, for example, correlate between a name that is parsed in one way and parsed in a different way in another
some
place.
Of that can be automated now.
Absolutely. A lot of it is automated, not some. That's kind of, we drive to a kind of a nirvana where everything, all of the correlation will be actually automated. And once you have that, you can actually apply very nice machine learning and AI on top of it, because then you run on a very clean and concise data. And machine learning can be much more impactful, of course, when there is no noise and no garbage that it needs to clean constantly.
Yeah. Amir, thank you so much for having this conversation with me today. I love it. In just 15 minutes, I learned a lot, and always happy when I get to learn something in these conversations.
Thank you.
Yeah. To find out more about Axonius X, please visit securityweekly.com/Axonius IDV. And for all Identiverse 2025 coverage, you can also visit securityweekly.com/IDV. And thanks again, Amir.
Thank you.
Welcome to Identiverse 2025. We're here recording live from the CyberRisk TV studio on the expo floor at the Mandalay Bay Conference Center in Las Vegas. I'm your host, Adrian Sanabria, and joining me for this interview is Artyom Pogosyan, CEO and co-founder at Britiv. Is it Britiv? Britiv. I'm so focused on saying your name right.
Close.
I forget to ask about the company, Britiv. Welcome. Looking forward to talking about this. This is very much a question that I feel is unanswered for a lot of people. So we're talking about identities and AI agents here. I think it's clear to me, I've talked about it a lot, but for the audience and for the conversation, let's talk a little bit about the challenges of AI agents, because I feel like we still haven't decided yet whether agents are more like human identities or machine identities, how we're going to manage them. Different agents are going to do different things, have different access to things. So what's the answer there?
Great question, Adrian, and you're correct. I think the industry is still trying to figure that out. Mm-hmm. What I would say from my perspective, they're kind of a little bit of both. They're like machine identities in the sense that you can't really secure those AI or agentic identities like humans with MFA or biometric, and they're just not they're not like humans that way. Mm-hmm. But they're like humans because they act and behave autonomously, and they can do things on their own. So it is a little bit like humans. Make decisions, correct. So it is a unique challenge, I think, and we're working on it. Let's just say, as an industry.
Yeah, and I guess getting into the more technical side of it, some of the challenges there, right? Because these agents are going to have to talk to a bunch of different things, which means authentication, which means access controls, right?
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, those are fundamental concepts, really. And as we've learned, especially over the past few years, that authentication, authorization, access controls, these very important security concepts that we've known for a long time have also evolved when it comes to new technologies. Like before the AI and agentic AI, it was more of the cloud, public cloud technologies and so on, workloads and machine identities. So yes, we had to revisit these concepts and try to find the right solutions for the new technologies and the new requirements.
And I worry that a lot of the building we see around agent to agent, MCP, stuff like that, isn't really super focused on security right now, is it?
And it's not different from other technologies or other innovation, right? And I think, let's
get it working first, I think is the mindset.
Exactly.
And then we'll worry about it.
Exactly. But I think what's different about AI is I think there's definitely general consensus that security can't be an afterthought. Mm-hmm. So while we're figuring out the functionality and other important aspects of agents and agentic technologies, there are active efforts and discussions to how to figure out the security for those technologies. Yes,
and it's again interesting to think about some of the use cases here. Like companies want to have a super employee that knows everything that's ever happened, and can answer any question about the business or any of the data that the business has, which kind of goes against the whole idea of least privilege and zero trust and narrowing down access control. Like the more you do that to an AI agent, the less useful it is, right? Yes. So how do we design for this and like, do we need to build new frameworks for this, or is this? I don't even know how to express it.
Yeah. It's challenging. I mean, you're not alone. I think even from the traditional sort of practitioner standpoint, these are new challenges. We're evaluating. We're trying to understand what we knew how to do and what we knew how it worked before. Does it apply? Is it relevant? I think one thing that I can say from Brightive's standpoint, from the company that I've co-founded, we've been in the front lines of the innovation in the identity space, especially when it comes to modern approaches like ephemeral identities and ephemeral access and privileges for identities. And some of the concepts, some of the solutions that we were able to bring to market and have the customers adopt, especially enterprise organizations, with these type of ephemeral identities that were introduced by workloads in the cloud, are very much applicable to AI and agentic AI. They behave kind of similarly. It's almost the AI and agentic AI is the next natural evolution of the machine identities that we saw, and they became so prevalent with the introduction of cloud infrastructure. Mm-hmm. So I think we have a good start here. It just is going to take more work for agentic identities.
That's something ephemerality is something I hadn't even considered, but now that you say it, rather than have this this virtual agent that is built like an employee and has an account that sticks around forever, the idea of maybe a container that exists for as long as it takes to complete a task sounds like a much better way of doing it.
Yeah, it has to mirror the behavior of the agent in agentic AI, right? I think it's fundamental to the design of the new solution. It has to mirror the behavior. And ephemerality is one attribute of that, but so is the access model and the access to the resource, kind of that model that has to mirror that short-lived kind of nature of the identity. So what it means is, I think you mentioned briefly in your comment, the non-standing or zero-standing access, which again, it mirrors the need of that identity. If it only exists for a couple of hours, what's the point of having that access there for 24/7 by 365, right? So those are the important considerations when designing the new solutions.
Yeah. So building for this, like what are you having to build? What are you having to do in addition to like a traditional IAM model to accommodate these things? From more of a features perspective or a capabilities perspective from the product that you have, and maybe just talk a little bit more about what Brightive does and what your products do for context there.
Sure, yeah. So Brightive.
I said Brightive again. Brightive.
Yeah, no worries. Brightive came to market about 6 years ago, and this was really the peak of the cloud adoption, cloud infrastructure and workloads, and we brought these concepts, new concepts for identity management and privilege management, like the ephemeral access and non-standing or zero-standing privilege model, to that stage of the market, and it has been adopted, and we have seen success across many enterprise and large organizations, as well as medium and small size organizations across different verticals like financial, fintech, biotech, retail, automotive, and so on. And this is a great sort of a platform that now has evolved and supported these organizations in their innovation and acceleration of their, adoption of new technologies. So today, when we look at the AI and agentic AI, what is missing and what is already here, I can sort of comment it from the standpoint of what's here from the legacy capability standpoint. There are great categories of products like identity governance, privileged access, authentication, and all these have been categories that have existed 2 decades or more. The problem with that is, the downside is they've been basically built for the human type of user, and they've evolved in response to the evolution of the human user needs. About 5 or 6 years ago, when cloud adoption started really taking off, we had to revisit those concepts and try to find a way to address the cloud, cloud workloads and machine identities. I think with AI, we have progressed in the right direction, but there are some new capabilities that are missing from the existing solutions. In fact, Brightive is one that is pioneering some new capabilities for specifically agentic AI, and those are along the lines of governance and lifecycle management of agentic identities. This is so fundamental to really understanding who, in this case, what, if you want to refer to them as identities, but they're not human, what should have access to what resources, for how long and when, and manage them throughout their life cycle. The other important piece that's missing here is data access. Again, I like your comment earlier that how much access is right. Today, when these technologies are still kind of being experimented with, soon to be rolled out into production environments, well, in the experimentation process, they're again focusing on the functionality, which means the access to data, access to these data lakes and so on, that is so critical for AI, is very broadly defined, so that the functionality can be tested and proven, right?
It's got to work first.
It's got to work first.
Yeah.
When we are getting ready to move them to production, that is not going to be the way these things can be rolled out. It is too permissive. It is going to introduce a huge risk exposure. So we need to really,
at least a few. Somebody will do it.
Somebody has to do it. There are different active sort of initiatives going on and defining the runtime authorization models, standards around that. And Brightive has already, as I said, Brightive has already been in the front lines of the industry, defining new models with zero standing access and fine-grained, context-aware access levels.
Yeah.
These are going to be so important to agentic AI access when it comes to data, and really making sure the data privacy regulations are met, data security requirements are met. There are a few others like overall policy enforcement, compliance and audit requirements and so on, that are specifically built for agentic type, identities or entities, right? Typically today, when a bank goes through a security audit, they're looking for the human identity access. They're not necessarily asking for an inventory of agentic identity access. We have to figure out how those things need to be brought into the fold for compliance and regulatory needs.
Yeah, it almost reminds me of addressing SQL injection by having prepared statements, right? Rather than just allowing full ability to query any data anytime, right? I imagine something like that we'll have to do on these data lakes. And And also, you need to understand your data pretty well, have good data hygiene. I feel like that's going to go. Do you think that's going to go hand in hand with being able to do that access control with the identities?
Absolutely, yeah. In the past few years, because of the massive amount of data that was generated, the data governance became an issue. I mean, there's new technologies in the market, data posture management and so on, right? That are so important for bringing that hygiene and the governance and security controls into the data side of the technologies. And yes, that becomes so important now to make sure that the access to data is properly managed, not just securely, but also efficiently managed. Because again, when we're talking about agentic identities, we're talking about velocity, we're talking about scale and speed. That for humans, that was not a concern,
right?
But it is for this type of identities. Without fundamental data controls and data access, hygiene, it's going to be very unscalable and insecure.
Yeah, I mean, in using the cloud, your example earlier about the cloud is a great example, because a lot of traditional security systems weren't designed for 10,000 assets to be created and destroyed in a day. So once we started seeing containers and using containers to scale, and same thing with disposable credentials, right? A lot of systems aren't designed like imagine, a traditional dashboard. If you create and destroy 1,000 identities in a day, it's just like it's all going to be a mess because it was only designed for humans.
Correct. Yes. And there's a lot of other implications, right? It's all auditability, monitoring, accountability and oversight. These are important questions. So you have to design it properly with those things in mind, and not just create and delete it, the credentials, but also make sure all those other important requirements are met.
So real quick before we wrap, where do people start? Where do people get started?
That's been a frequent topic or question today and yesterday at the conference, and everybody's looking for how do I start on this journey? It is a journey. Everybody's realizing it is a journey, right? I think there are some very common sense, I guess, steps I would say, right? Is first and foremost to architect what you're building and have this framework view of what you're building, because that will help understand the big picture.
Yeah.
Often when that's missing, there's a lot of tactical steps that don't lead to the end goal. It ends up being a lot of rework, a lot of missed steps, right? So I always recommend that building that big picture view of what you're building, what your future state looks
almost like creating a film, you got to storyboard it, right?
There you go.
Yeah.
Very very good comment. Yes, that's an important step. Next, when you're starting to see, obviously a lot of companies that are already building and experimenting AI and agentic AI have timelines. They want to be in production in the next few months, in the next year or so. So aligning with those timelines with specific milestones where, for example, one of those is having the security components, security controls and guardrails designed and fully vetted to align with your AI, technology and workflows, and not, again, we've learned this in the past, cannot be an afterthought.
Yeah.
It has to be built in and designed in. Those are important things that we can do today. We can start aligning with these agentic workflows and data access, what type of access, and how we should design that. These are important things that can be done today. Ultimately, it's the implementation and monitoring and oversight that needs to be also thought through, because once we flip the switch, these things are going to be live.
Yeah.
And we're not going to have time to react.
Yeah.
Coincidentally, a new category was launched today by Aragon Research, which is an expert research firm for AI and agentic AI. The new category is called Agentic Identities and Security Platform. And we're incredibly proud that Brightev was featured for our pioneering efforts for this new category. Please visit the Brightev website or our social page to download this report and for more information.
Great points, great conversation. Thank you again, Art, for sitting down with me. This was very interesting. You've given me a lot to think about.
Absolutely. I enjoyed the conversation, Adrian. Thank you.
All right. To find out more about Brightive, please visit securityweekly.com/BrightiveIDV. For all Identiverse 2025 coverage by CRA, you can visit securityweekly.com/IDV. Thanks again, Art.
Of course. Thank you.
Welcome to Identiverse 2025. We're here recording live from the CyberRisk TV studio on the expo floor at the Mandalay Bay Conference Center in Las Vegas. I'm your host, Adrian Sanabria, and joining me for this interview is AJ Amlani, President and CEO of Aware.
Thanks, Adrian, for the opportunity.
Yeah. So Aware, I do recall, so I do a podcast and we have a news segment and we cover like all the new companies that come out and funding, acquisitions, all that kind of activity.
Yeah.
A lot of us on the show at least used to be ex-analysts, or I actually still are. Yeah, Jackie's still an ex-analyst. And so tell me a little bit about Aware. I remember it crossing, we talked about it in one of the shows, but it's left my brain entirely, so catch me up.
Yeah, sure. We're actually a 30-year veteran of biometric technology. We've been experimenting with this technology and were hired by the FBI originally when they were actually doing fingerprint-based background checks in a digital fashion back in the mid-'80s and '90s.
Aware's been around that long?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
It was actually founded by 4 MIT PhDs who were asked by the federal government to create a common fingerprint standard. And then since then, we've been developing face biometric technology, iris-based technology, voice technology, and also working on ways to be able to secure biometrics going forward, especially for today's day and age and the attackers that the world is seeing.
Yeah, and it's so interesting because biometrics has been around forever, but it's evolved so much.
Yeah.
It's changed so much.
It's absolutely crazy. I was actually terrified of biometrics when I first came across it. And the reason is it's because Minority Report.
Yeah.
You know, watching Tom Cruise get his eyeballs replaced, only to then have creepy spiders come around and do iris matching on him, right? It was absolutely horrific for me. But then post 9/11, I actually wanted to do something for the country. So I signed up to work in the White House and helped start the Department of Homeland Security. Tom Ridge, the Secretary of Homeland Security at the time, the first one, he actually assigned me to work on a lot of our advanced technology that we were deploying to be able to amplify the efforts of Homeland Security. And he aligned with biometrics as one of the technologies to help secure our country, but yet still allow for the free flow of people and commerce.
So around airport security, border security, that kind of thing, or more broadly than that?
Yeah, at the time it was actually focused around port security, right? So we have our nation's largest land ports within San Diego and also on the northern border in my hometown of Detroit, Michigan, is also a very large port. And then also airports as well. And being able to identify people accurately within airports was a really big imperative for us so that people could still believe that they could have open doors when they come to the country, but yet we can still have secure borders.
Yeah, and it's really cool. You know, I've talked to some identity verification companies, some biometric companies, and it seems cool that we are at a point where cameras are good enough quality that from across, you know, in a building lobby, from considerable distance, you know, you can do that face verification so that by the time somebody gets to an entry point, gets to a man trap, you know, whatever the physical security is,
that's right,
and just walk on through it. They don't even have to slow down.
Yeah, exactly. So we're actually deploying a lot of that technology today for the federal government, and we've been the go-to agency for a very long time, the go-to company to be able to partner with all of our government agencies to allow them to deploy biometrics at scale. It does actually get really complicated when you deploy biometrics at scale. Right now, the commercial world is really doing kind of selfie checks and other things on a one-to-one basis off of a driver's license and verifying the driver's license is real and then doing a one-to-one match. We've been doing very complicated biometric systems for decades. We really understand all the challenges that are associated with trying to deploy these at scale. And our biometric engineers and our scientists are some of the best in class US citizens that have been deploying this on behalf of the US government. And now that the commercial world is in fact engaging into biometrics, it's a really exciting time for us.
And it's there's a lot of things that you don't necessarily think about in terms of, like earlier today we were talking about, or maybe it was yesterday. It's all blurred together.
Yeah, that's okay. It's a long conference.
Yeah,
we've only been here 2 days.
Like leaving a building, like that's something you want to capture as well. And using face identification for that. Like I don't just want to know when somebody's entered a building and do the access check there.
That's right.
But it's also, if I'm doing an investigation, I want to know how long they were there, when they physically left the building. Like that's important information as well.
Yeah, that's right. And the physical location entry and access has now actually migrated towards digital access as well.
Yeah.
And that's why we're here, right, at this conference, because from our perspective, a lot of people are guessing at who the person is.
Yeah.
And a lot of people are just guessing at whether or not it is in fact a person. Right. And our technology allows you to be able to use both best-in-class matching algorithms to verify that the person is who they say they are, but also that they are in fact a human by using a technology that we call liveness.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, and that's again, so having with Aware having been doing it so long, how much of this really depended on technology getting to the point where we had the ability to do depth perception, high enough resolution? Like, how much of that was kind of required to get to this point?
A lot of it, actually.
Yeah.
The early deployments of biometrics, when I first deployed biometrics at the airports, we had purpose-built hardware, big fingerprint systems, purpose-built cameras, and what I recognized was actually consumers preferred using biometrics over being asked a series of big intrusive questions or trying to prove that they are who they say they are. Instead, just look in the camera, put your fingerprint down.
Yeah.
I recognized that it was very much a consumer tool, which is when I launched Clear, the airport security fast line, to be able to allow people to get easy access through airport security by just using their biometrics.
It does seem less intrusive. I wonder, just kind of going off script here, how much of an issue, like one of the things we've noticed with passwordless is it feels to a lot of people as less secure. Because their whole life they've been trained that a password keeps your account secure.
That's right.
And all of a sudden you give them a system where they press the login button and they're just in.
They're in.
Like they don't see the exchange of authentication data, so it feels very dangerous to them that happened like that. And I wonder, like, also with physical security and biometrics getting to the point where our face is identified, 30 seconds before we actually reach the entry point, like, are we going to run into that same, like maybe some training needs to be done there for people to feel comfortable with it? Is it going to feel less secure to people?
Yeah.
Like, do people push for things that are unnecessary just so that it feels more secure?
Yeah. It's fascinating to think about that customer perception. And the interesting part about passkeys is when you anchor passkeys on a really weak foundation in the first place, which is a user ID and password.
Yeah.
How good is that passkey really? How secure is it? So I actually think consumers have a right to feel concerned.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, if you've anchored it on an unsecure password and username in the first place, that becomes a significant challenge. And so using biometrics actually does allow people to have the comfort and the confidence that they can prove that they are who they say they are. If you think about face biometrics in general, I mean, people learn how to recognize faces when they're 3 months old. Mm-hmm. So it's very innate. All we're doing is replicating that with technology today. So it's very intuitive for people to be able to use biometrics to prove who they say they are. They do it when they walk into their favorite coffee shop, right? Or their favorite restaurant, and they're asked, do you want the usual? Sure, right? And they know somebody else is just recognizing their face. All we're doing is replicating that experience online to be able to make it very fast and very easy for customers to be able to be rewarded and recognized instead of having to go and jump through hoops trying to basically prove they are who they say they are.
One of the other trends I found interesting is that a lot of identity verification companies seem to be depending on consumer hardware these days. Like onboarding for, make sure you're not North Korean, or whatever the concern might be. Kind of depend on you having a modern smartphone in your pocket, which I find kind of fascinating because it's a consumer-owned device, but it's become such an essential part of corporate security.
That's right.
Yeah, that more of a. I don't know if you have anything to add to that, but I just find that is kind of odd that that's just the way the technology's developed, that the best quality cameras you have when you're at home, you're trying to get a job, trying to get through the identity verification process, is something that you choose to buy in your own.
That's right. And actually, even the introduction of things like Windows Hello and Face ID and other things like that are tied to the device itself, they do leverage biometrics. The hard part is they haven't actually identified the person up front.
Yeah.
So they're leveraging the biometrics, basically matching against whoever was the first person who enrolled on that device. And you're not ever verifying that the person is in fact a person or the right person. You're just using potentially a deepfake image to begin with to do the enrollment. And now corporations are actually relying upon these systems like Face ID and Windows Hello and others to now link in with passkeys to secure their enterprise, never verifying that the owner of the phone or the owner of the biometric is in fact the right person that should be accessing
at the enrollment point.
At the enrollment point.
Yeah, interesting.
Yep.
Yeah, so it seems like everything is going towards face. So it's interesting. Windows Hello will do face, but only with certain hardware.
Yes.
So I have mostly Windows devices, though I do have an iPhone, and I still use fingerprint on all my Windows devices, whereas I use face with all my Apple devices because I guess none of my cameras are Windows Hello compatible. So, do we see everything going towards face now and kind of away from fingerprints in terms of biometrics?
I mean, fingerprints historically have always been a law enforcement way of identifying yourself. I think the availability and the footprint on devices is actually pretty small for fingerprint. It is a touch sensor, it's relatively small, but can only really recognize one finger at a time. Face is sort of the intuitive way to be able to allow for biometric recognition. It's the way that we all recognize each other, right, walking around. It also avoids some of the challenges of touch, which is, like as an example, you grab pizza before this interview, right? Your hands might have been oily. Being able to put that on top of a device, that could have actually been interesting and hard to be able to recognize.
Yep.
Whereas your face is always your face. You might change a little bit over time. You might shave, you might do different things like that. But for the most part, the basic features of your face, especially leveraging tools like AI to be able to accurately predict that you are who you say you are, all of our algorithms are basically trained at scale. And that's the other benefit, is you get at scale data sets to be able to train on, making face the viable option that it is today. Whereas historically, it wasn't as viable of an option 10 years ago.
Yeah, it makes sense. So really, kind of combining biometrics and identity, it seems like even with passkeys, with face scanning, it seems like everything is it just me, or is easier becoming also associated with more secure way of doing things? Like
that's fascinating.
Do we still want to do face plus something else, or how do you see that evolving into the future?
That's really fascinating. I hadn't thought about that before, and so it is actually evolving into convenience and security, where you're not having to sacrifice either, right, or both. And so with face, what's interesting is you think about multi-factor authentication. Everywhere we go, we bring our face. Our face is actually a thing. So it's actually something we carry. Normally, when you think about multi-factor authentication, you think about factor 1, which is what you know, factor 2, which is what you carry, and factor 3, which is who you are. Who you are is biometrics. That's always been the third factor.
Right.
And but factor 2 is what you carry. Guess what? You also carry your face everywhere you go. So it is in fact a thing. So doing a biometric match in one instance is in fact a multi-factor authentication. And if you verify that the face itself is actually a live face using liveness and best-in-class liveness tools like Aware's technology, you're able to conduct multi-factor authentication all in one transaction. No more OTPs, no more downloading apps for authenticators. Being able to actually conduct that both in one transaction is a huge benefit for society and for organizations as well to protect the enterprise.
Wow. Yeah, that's a lot to chew on. Yeah, that's it's fascinating. But yeah, I mean, that's something I've loved about it is it really is. I love when there's an opportunity where the best thing you can do is also the most secure thing, right? And kind of naturally reduces that friction. It's something I push back on a lot. Were security keys.
Yeah.
Like everybody's raving about And I understand why people like security keys, hardware keys, but I'm also old enough to have carried multiple RSA tokens with me.
Yeah.
The old 6-digit changes every 60 seconds or 30 seconds. And I've got a phone in my pocket. Like, why am I going back? Why am I going back to keychains for things?
Yeah.
But yeah, it's interesting to see how it's going to evolve going forward.
I can't tell you how many CISOs I've known that have gotten fired for forcing their workforce to have to carry another thing with them also, right? It's a real big stress, and it's a real big challenge for people to hold on to something like that. They inevitably lose it, which then opens up the opportunity for bad actors to be able to get their hands on it. And they have to get it reissued. And then, so you have to build in a reissuance process anyway to be able to get a new token. What is that reissuance process? What are you anchoring that identity on? A username and password? No, you have to anchor it on a biometric in the first place. So if you have to anchor something on a biometric in the first place, just use the biometric to authenticate it in the first place. It makes the most sense. I mean, back when I worked with the Department of Defense launching their first ever Silicon Valley unit of the DoD, we protected our nation's infrastructure from bad actors, from third-party nation-state actors. And those tools in hands of the nation-state actors are now in the hands of everyday adversaries that are attacking our systems nonstop, left and right. And they've been democratized. Those tools are now low-cost capabilities, and the attackers are actually sharing all best practices that they use to attack our systems. So we need to stay one step ahead or two steps ahead, ideally, to be able to protect our enterprise and monitor these bad actors to see what they're doing. A lot of them are in the process of creating deepfakes right now. They're creating deepfakes to be able to pretend like they are someone that they're not on videos. They're creating deepfakes to be able to trick biometric systems today that are being deployed. So just using proper liveness tools is a really important component to be able to protect your enterprise.
Yeah. AJ, fascinating conversation. Giving us a lot to think about. I appreciate you sitting down with me.
Really great. Appreciate the opportunity, Adrian. Thank you.
All right, to find out more about Aware, you can visit securityweekly.com/AwareIDV. For all Identiverse 2025 coverage, you can visit securityweekly.com/IDV. Thanks again, AJ.
Thank you, Adrian. Appreciate it. Thanks.
Hello and welcome to this Identiverse 2025 interview sponsored by SDG Corporation. I'm your host, Adrian Sanabria, founder of the Defenders Initiative and host of the Enterprise Security Weekly podcast. Today, I'm talking to Ajay Gupta, CEO of SDG Corporation. And today, we're talking about securing digital trust. Welcome, Ajay. How are you?
Good, Adrian. Thank you.
Yeah, so I think first, maybe if you could tell me a little bit about SDG and what you do there, just for context.
So I'm the founder and CEO of SDG. We're a cybersecurity and risk management consulting firm. We primarily, focus on three main work streams: identity, risk, and threat, and work with our clients who tend to be mostly large enterprises in helping them with their identity programs and putting in risk strategies and managing the threat environment for external perimeter.
Right. So that covers a lot of ground, I imagine. You get a lot of interesting insight into the types of problems that they're dealing with.
We do, and interestingly, all three areas are so interconnected. So it's policy driving control systems, and then the behavior of control systems, and effectiveness of control systems, and then response to potential attack and threat vectors that all organizations are facing today.
So I think we should define cyber resilience before we jump into what AI-driven resilience is. So tell me a bit about how you think of cyber resilience first. What does that mean to an organization?
So there's actually not a tremendous difference between what you want out of cyber resilience and what you want out of AI-driven cyber resilience. AI just enables things to happen in a more efficient and faster and more effective way. But specifically, it really is about the strategic readiness of an organization and their ability to adapt in real time. And then it's not just adapt, but also stay relevant in business and be able to continue to function as a business in spite of any cyber attacks.
Gotcha. And so AI driven is more about how you get there, I imagine.
It really is. So, it's really about, organizations that are leveraging AI to deploy that capability is sort of enhancing their ability to defend against threats, to adapt, evolve, and lead despite the complexity and scale and the disruption that they might face from these cyber attacks. So, if you think of sort of traditional cybersecurity as sort of building walls, AI-driven resilience is like building an immune system. It's always learning, it's always adapting, it's picking up weak signals, it's detecting changes in behavior, and it's responding or giving the organization the ability to respond autonomously at a pace that humans just alone cannot match. So in a way, it's not just a technical upgrade. It's today with the kind of AI-driven attacks, cyber attacks that organizations are facing, it's a strategic imperative. And in this digital first world that we live in, trust in our systems is non-negotiable, really, right? So without it, we risk failing our customers, our regulators, and the market. So I think going forward, the differentiator between enterprises that are going to lead and those that lag will really be how well they embed AI into their risk fabric, not just to react to these threats, but also to anticipate and adapt.
Yeah, and it's AI is interesting. We're currently, I feel like we're still in largely an experimental phase here. Your experience might say different here, but where are some of the places where we're finding, and just to clarify, I don't know if we're exclusively talking about generative AI or also talking about like machine learning and things like that as well. So it might be good to clarify that. And what are some of the use cases? Where are some of the places you're finding AI most useful for in cybersecurity in general?
Yeah. So machine learning really is part of or a precursor to AGI, right? So it's just generative, AI or artificial generative intelligence. Where I think there are use cases for every organization are a little different. But the reality that we all face is that every organization has more vulnerabilities than it can fix. And the challenge is really to figure out which ones to fix, which ones that could bring the business to its knees and act on those first. And that's really where AI comes in as something that can help those organizations. The most promising application of AI that we're seeing is contextual risk prioritization. So AI helps not only assess just the severity of the vulnerability, but also contextual factors like asset criticality, exploitability, external exposure, leading to just a smarter prioritization of risks. And this is a conversation changer, at the boardroom, because now organizations aren't just patching for compliance, but they're allocating finite security resources towards risk that matters, towards systems that handle customer data, drive manufacturing systems, or those that power revenue-generating operations.
And one of the interesting things about generative AI is it, by nature, is kind of unpredictable, right? It's non-deterministic. If you ask it the same question on 2 different days, you could get 2 different answers, or maybe the same answer formatted differently. When using AI in some of these use cases, I think certainly with the use case you mentioned, if I'm asking it for a report or context or something like that, I don't care if one day it uses bullet points and one day it doesn't, as long as the information is there, right? Like that doesn't impact me as much. But as we start to use it in other places like security operations, how do we build trust around it, that it's going to give us what we need and reliably every time?
trust and reliability are key, and you use those two words in your question.
Yeah.
And trust is at the core of any effective security program. And it's even more important when using AI. So CISOs, or organizations have to ensure transparency and trust, and there's a number of different ways they can do it. So first, it's actually all falls under the purview of sort of creating guardrails. But I'll sort of try to break it down generically. They should be clear about how AI is being used, what data it's analyzing, how the decisions are being made, and what role the AI is playing compared to human analysts. When employees and business leaders understand that process, it builds confidence. The second thing is to make the AI-driven decisions explainable. As you said, you might get different decisions on different days. So from a CEO's perspective, here's the question I ask. If a regulator, auditor, or journalist asks how we made a decision that affected a user or a system or a customer, can we explain it? If the answer is no, we're not in safe territory. That's why explainable AI, is essential in security operations. And the third sort of element of those guardrails are regular audits and testing. By continuously reviewing how the AI models perform and checking for biases or errors and ensuring that they're up to date to the latest threats, organizations can prove that the AI is reliable and fair. And finally, don't leave the humans out of the loop. AI should support and enhance human judgment, not replace it. Giving security teams visibility into the decisions that AI is making and the ability to intervene when needed ensures that technology remains a trustworthy partner. So, clear communication, explainable AI, regular oversight, and keeping skilled professionals at the center of security ops.
Yeah, I agree. And the more I hear people talk about agentic, and you talk about making this a more complex process where one agent's maybe talking to another, we might maybe have specialized agents that do specific things. The more I think, wow, we really need a way to debug this process. And, if something goes wrong in the output, maybe there's 5 or 6 agents. We have to figure out, okay, which one hallucinated, which one, maybe the system prompting changed or something like that, or the model changed and we have to update the prompting or something like that.
Right.
I imagine we'll see more and more tools to help with that observability, that debug as we go forward.
Absolutely. And that's why regular audits in the beginning are really important to sort of understand, how things can morph as AI gets smarter.
Yeah. I had one, I was playing around with local models. It switched into a different language on me and I couldn't get it to switch back. It was a very strange, it was one of the DeepSeek models. And that's the only time that's ever happened to me with a model. It was very strange.
It is strange. Yeah.
What does, you've already talked a little bit about what a roadmap would look like here. But really aligning these initiatives with long-term business resilience goals. And really, a lot of the AI I've seen has been driven by the business. When I talk to a lot of cybersecurity folks, they're actually getting pressure from the business side to use AI, which I find interesting. But so maybe that's part of the answer to the question there. The business is already kind of bought into it, but I'd like to hear your take.
Yeah, well, so for one, take a step back, it's no different than what's happened with sort of technology sort of made things simpler for the user, which is the goal of technology always. And by doing that, what we're doing is we're shifting the complexity lower and back to the technology organization while making the customer or user experience simpler, as natural as possible, right? That's always been the goal. So it does create more complexity for everybody else that is supporting those technologies. So this has happened, in evolutions in the past as well. So no different there. But another problem that this creates is all these agents and the business deploying AI is creating a ton of non-human identity traffic on the system. So that's a different problem that comes around because of this. This is not just humans logging in. Now you've got agents logging into the system, getting access to sensitive data, and possibly doing something with it that might expose the organization. So that's a whole nother problem that comes out of this. But getting back to your question about aligning, these AI initiatives, so it's really, comes down to we look at it sort of three things, right? Visibility, velocity, and vigilance. So visibility is all about knowing what matters. So that's really the foundation. So AI gives you full visibility into your digital estate, what an organization owns, where it lives, how it's exposed. And, if you think of it as sort of turning the lights on across the organization, helps identify hidden risks before they become headlines. So you have to, as the business starts leveraging this data, you have to sort of understand which data is really important, which data matters, and what data any AI initiative is touching. The second piece, again, this goes back into sort of the cyber protection aspect as well, is velocity. So AI gives you the ability to act faster on what matters. So here, organizations will automate responses. AI will help prioritize the real threat and accelerate response workflows, freeing up analysts to focus on higher value decisions. So you move from sort of reactive firefighting to proactive containment. And the third is vigilance, staying ahead of really what's next and developing this somewhat of a future-ready posture. Because AI is not only reacting, but it's also predicting, and it's doing that for business, doing that for cyber. And it's enabled self-healing systems, simulates certain attack scenarios, or could be, go-to-market scenarios for the marketing organization, or it could be, product positioning scenarios for product, the product team. And it continuously adapts as the business and the threat landscape of the business landscape evolves. So this is, from a cyber perspective, we focus on all of this, not for just the sake of compliance or governance or regulatory oversight, but to protect what matters most, which is data, operations, and revenue. If that sort of AI roadmap from a cyber perspective doesn't connect back to revenue protection or operational stability or brand resilience, since the business is really pushing this, then, it's not a strategy from a cyber perspective. Then it becomes sort of more of an experiment and a reactive tactic, if you will. When organizations face this pressure, this is sort of how they have to sort of respond and put in an entire cyber strategy, leveraging AI on top of that.
And I think the best way to wrap up this conversation is we're talking about implementing AI very broadly here. Where should folks get started on that roadmap? Where do we start?
The first thing is, like any new initiative, don't try to boil the ocean. Start with one or two business critical use cases. Whether that's identifying insider threat, reducing false positives in the SOC, improving visibility into third-party risk, which is a huge problem right now, and let those be the proving ground. Because when AI proves that it can reduce exposure or increase response efficiency in a measurable way, then adoption will follow organically. Our advice is keep it simple. Start with the risks that matter the most to the business, and identify these key pain points. Look at where the current security processes are weakest, such as alert fatigue or manual investigation. Target those for AI for assistance. Define success very clearly. Be specific about what AI should improve. Is it speed? Is it accuracy? Is it efficiency? Or is it compliance? Start small, scale fast, right? This is sort of a mantra that, we've been using for a while. Launch pilots in high impact areas. Could be phishing detection, could be automated response, then expand based on results.
Yeah.
And then finally, what we talked about, oversight and trust. Enable that, choose explainable AI, train the teams, establish feedback loops, etc. to make sure that everybody's in the know. So yeah, with these clear objectives and focused pilots and strong oversight, I think organizations have the ability to unlock near-term value and build, sort of a long-term resilience using this.
Well said. Jay, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you, Adrian. Appreciate it.
All right, to find out more about SDG, you can visit securityweekly.com/SDGIDV. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.